Welcome to the Nutritious and Delicious podcast. I'm your host, Bethany, and I've been in the health and wellness space for over 17 years. As a previous health nurse and now a certified holistic nutritional consultant, I help clients with their hormone health, fertility, and family health. Join us on this journey as we connect with experts from around the globe, sharing insights and personal stories along the way. So today I'm here with the wonderful Jennifer. So welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so Jennifer is actually also a nurse, and she is the owner of Faith Infertility. And after struggling in her own infertility journey times two now, it became her passion to encourage, empower, and support other women struggling with infertility and pregnancy loss. So I love this topic today. We're going to talk all about caring for your body before conceiving. And I would love for you, Jennifer, just to come on and tell us kind of how you got started in this space with fertility.
I think it honestly started as a young child. My mom asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I was like, "A mom." And she's like, "Well, but like, what do you want to do for work?" And I was like, "Well, a baby nurse to take care of other people's babies before I
Aw,
had my own babies." So, women's health and just like pregnancy, postpartum has always been a big part of my life. Like, while other kids were watching Full House or whatever it was, I was watching Taking Care of Babies and the Baby Story, whatever it was on
I
TLC.
love that.
I know,
I love
yeah.
that show.
So it's just been a huge part of my life um, early on, and then once I started wanting to have kids, we pulled my IUD, and I didn't get a period, and I was like, "What's up with this?"
Hmm.
Um, and so then it just made me be like, "Wow, what like disparity there really is around women's health and fertility and conception and what a menstrual cycle is." And just going through my own fertility, it just really amplified my passion for women's health.
Wonderful. So kind of start us at the beginning because I know you mentioned to me sort of you grew up without sort of the proper education around your menstrual cycle. So kind of give us the story on that first.
Yeah. So I don't think my mom was given the right education either. So I'm going to talk about my mom a little bit here, but I don't think it's her fault either.
Yeah.
But I was never given proper sex education. I was never given proper period education. I got my first period and I was just kind of like, what is this? Like I'd heard about a period, but I was just like, is this what this is supposed to be like?
Yeah. Am I
um,
dying? That's what a lot of people think.
yeah, like, am I okay?
Yeah.
And I remember my older sister had to show me how to use a tampon because I just truly
Didn't.
didn't know anything. Um, and honestly, my mom had never used one either, so that's why my sister had to show me. And I just remember like looking at the insert in the box and like trying to read the instructions. Um, so I mean, that was just kind of the education I was given. And then for like sex, it was just like very we don't really talk about it, you don't do it, and once you're married, then you can do it and you'll figure it out. Kind of it was
Right.
kind of the basis of it.
Fed to the
Um
shark.
yeah, yeah, like good luck, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and I just remember asking like a few questions around my cycle, especially like cervical mucus. And I was like, Mom, why is, this coming out? And she's like, Ew, it is. And I was like, Yeah. And I
Oh
felt
my
like something
god.
was wrong with
Yeah.
me.
That's
So,
hilarious, sorry, but
yeah.
yes, it's interesting because you're curious and you're young and you're like, "Well, is this normal? Is this not normal?"
Right.
How did this sort of lack of knowledge, like, impact your fertility then going into being an adult?
It significantly impacted my fertility. In fact, I think when I went to high school, most of the girls in high school were getting on birth control.
Mm,
And I just assumed that that was what you do. Like you get your period, you go into high school and you get on birth control. And my mom was very like, I don't know about birth control. Like God's made your body to do what it's supposed to do. Like why take a pill to do anything different?
right.
And I was just like, well, I don't know, but everyone else is doing it in high school. And not that, I mean, if everyone else is doing drugs, I wasn't doing
Yeah.
drugs, but like, I just like everyone, all my friends like made it seem like it was healthier to be on the birth
Right.
control pill than not. And so I got on the birth control without being sexually active, with really out having no fertility or period, like, I had heavy periods, but they weren't super heavy. I mean, I think they were pretty normal.
Right.
Um, so I went on birth control for really no reason, and I had a ton of complications. I mean, one caused, like, uterine fibroids, another caused nightmares, another one I was getting anemic on and was having constant periods. Um, so I was just trying all these different birth control methods, and then, around the same time, in high school, I developed an eating disorder. And so I think that there was a lot to play with, like, my fertility being impacted by lack of eating, over exercising.
Yeah.
Um, so then finally I was just like, I'm done with birth control. Like, I can't find anything that works. So I stopped taking birth control, all the while having an eating disorder. And I eventually lost my period.
Mhm.
And I remember telling my mom one time, I was just like, I'm not getting my period anymore. And she's like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. And I was just like, yeah, isn't it great? Like,
Yeah.
no period problems, not an inconvenience. And that was just kind of left like that for a couple of years. And then when I went inpatient for my eating disorder, they're like, have you had a period? And I was like, no, I don't have one. Isn't that great? And they're like, no, that's not great. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, like, huh?
Yeah. And they're
This
like, that's a
isn't
sign that
normal?
you're really malnourished. And I was like, oh. So,
Mhm.
like, I didn't even know that fertility was impacted by nutrition or lack of eating,
Yeah.
until I went inpatient and doctors told me. Um, and I do remember seeing my pediatrician during some of the times that I was in an eating disorder, and they're like, I remember them kind of like offhandedly saying like, "Yeah, she doesn't get a period, but she's small, so I'm not surprised." And so I just was like, "Oh, okay." You know, like, he's not worried, I'm not worried.
Right.
Um, and then I got my period back going through recovery. And then I I got out of my eating disorder treatment and went into nursing school, and I had some periods here and there, and I just chalked it up to stress. And
Yeah.
I know I had some kind of like, I don't want to say remission, but like,
Episodes, I would imagine.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, the stress of nursing school would cause me to have stress, but then also lack of eating, over exercising, things like that.
Right.
Um, I didn't really think much of it, and then my senior year of nursing school, I met my now husband, we got engaged, and I got put on the IUD because I was going into night shift nursing, and I was like, "Well, I'm not gonna be able to take birth control, I'm getting married, I don't wanna get pregnant, I'm a new nurse, XYZ." My doctor was like, "IUD," and I was like, "Great, let's do it." Um, and then a couple years, well, no, I had it in for 4 years, so about
Sorry, I was just gonna
a
ask you
ye
with the IUD, was it the hormonal
uh-huh.
one or the copper one? Because there's 2 different kinds.
Good question. It was the hormonal one. It
Yeah.
was the Skyla. So it
Okay.
was not as, like, strong as the Mirena, and it's supposed to be, like, for people who hadn't had pregnancies before.
Okay.
Um, and I started having, like, just, like, painful intercourse and things like that with having the Skyla in. Um, and I would tell them like, "Yeah, I'm not really having a period," and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's normal on the IUD, don't worry about it."
Mhm.
Um, and then I would tell them like, "I'm having really painful intercourse," and they're like, "Oh, just use more lube, you'll be fine." I'm like, "Okay,"
Yeah.
and just really kind of got swept under the rug about it. Um, and then when I had it pulled out is obviously when I had the fertility problems, and it really left me very clueless on, I mean, not how to get pregnant, but kind of how to get pregnant and like what was going on with my cycle and where my health was at because come to find out, like, I was way malnourished for what my body type. I was
Right.
a normal weight, but, like, not for me and
Right.
not for my exercise level and my stress level and things like that.
There's so many different things in terms of, like, body types and everything, and it's quite common, I see as well in the nutrition space with infertility, where there's one end of the spectrum is, like, under eating, over exercising, and then the other side where there's, like, high BMI, obesity. So there is a very polar opposite, and they still contribute sort of to the same issue.
They do.
What were the messages like you were receiving? So it sounds like you had a couple of things that were being said to you sort of from that medical community regarding your fertility struggles and kind of just hearing like, oh, she's just small, like this is normal for that, right? How did that sort of shape your choices at the time? Because it sounded like you just kind of continued with, oh, okay, well, this doesn't seem to be bothering the doctor, so I'll just continue.
Yeah, I think just I feel I'm trying to say this in the correct terminology, but I think in the medical profession, there's fat shaming and then there's thin privilege, I think is what they call it.
Yeah.
And I got like a lot of that. Um, oh, you're fine, you're healthy, you're exercising, keep doing what you're eating.
Right.
I wouldn't get a period and they're like, oh, well, just eat healthier. And I'm like, well, I think I'm eating pretty healthy, you know, like,
Right.
so then it would almost make it worse because I was like, well, I'm trying to eat healthier to get my period
Right.
back. And really it would be like, I'm eating less calories because I'm trying to eat more fruits and vegetables or whatever it was that they wanted me to eat. Um, and I remember one doctor I went to because I was having some GI issues. And he was like, well, and I was at this point a little bit lower on the BMI scale. And he was like, well, your BMI is normal if you were Chinese. And I was like,
Oh my God.
okay, like, I mean, but I'm
Yeah.
not, but okay.
Yeah. It's insane sometimes when I hear these things because, again, like you said, you could technically be eating calories in terms of like what your body is enough or be a normal weight, quote unquote, for your height. But there's so many different body types out there, and what works for one woman at one height doesn't always match another woman in terms of sort of like over exercising. Like you said, it's like continuing to sort of reward that behavior of, oh, well, you're exercising, so that's great, but not realizing you're probably overdoing it for your
Right.
body or needing to switch to maybe a different type of exercise to help. From your perspective as a labor nurse, because you work in basically the maternity units as well, which is fabulous to hear, what do you now see as like too much medical intervention in terms of the labor and delivery process? And how do you think that like really affects the impact of like a woman's experience?
Well, I think it's not just the labor and delivery. Like, there's a lot of interventions that happen, not just in the labor and delivery unit, but from the time that we're young. I mean, like I mentioned, in high
Yeah,
school, we're thrown birth control pills for tiny problems. Like,
right.
oh, you have some cramping and you don't know how to handle your period, birth control. Oh, you're having sex, birth control. Like they just throw all these interventions
Yeah,
onto women at a very young age, and then it continues. So birth control, and then IVF, and then inductions and C-sections and
yeah,
hysterectomies. And it's almost like they're sending this message that you and your body don't know how to do what it's supposed to do. And so you need our medical
yeah.
to be normal or to function or to survive. And that's not true.
It reminded me right away of my own experience, like having been a nurse myself. I have also been on the labor ward and everything too, and got to see that firsthand. So it was really fascinating. It was the same sort of experience, and definitely being on the other side of it. With my first son, I had him as a hospital birth, and my second son was too, but I did it a different way. First time I went in very scared, as a lot of women do, not knowing what to expect. I think because I was like, again, not understanding, like, is this supposed to happen? Is this normal? I still remember sort of saying that out loud to people, like the nurses around me, like, is this normal? But no one else could feel what I was feeling. And I was sort of looking to other people, like, am I okay? Like, is this normal? But I think I was sort of scared that like it wasn't like a normal process. And then I think what happened was, because I was scared, I started asking for intervention, and it got worse, and it almost got to the point of an emergency C-section, which thankfully it didn't end up that situation. But I saw how quickly like everything sort of happened. And for my second son, I didn't want to have that same experience. So I almost had to like retrain myself while I was pregnant the second time to, I guess, tell myself that my body could do it. Like you said, with the whole period thing, it's like, this is normal. This is natural. Like, this is what my body is meant to do. And I think because I'd already gone through the physical process of birthing a baby, I was like, I can do this. I can do this. And second time round, I ended up in the hospital, but with a midwife and a doula team. So I did it, and I did it without anything. Like, I was so amazed with myself because kind of from one baby to the other, I had two completely different experiences. But I love how sort of like you are in that space and you see that. Like, how do you empower women when you are in like the labor ward, like there's a lot of coaching that would be going on. And because you would hear that too, that same thing, like, I can't do this, I can't keep going, like, this isn't normal. So what I'm sure, you would probably be a really good guiding light for a lot of these women. So what do you kind of say to them, like when you're in the labor and delivery ward and they're experiencing these kind of same crazy issues?
I think the biggest thing is just really encouraging whoever it is, you're doing a great job, like you've got this, you're so strong. Because I think in those moments that fear creeps in and they're like, I can't do this, I don't got this, whatever it may be. And then like when it comes to a lot of decisions I have to make, I say trust your instincts. Like, what's your body telling you?
Yeah.
Like really listen to your gut and it'll tell you, and they're like, I feel, nervous about this. I'm like, okay, like we don't have to make a decision right now. Like you can listen to your body. You can I mean, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to take time, but a lot of times it's not an urgent decision that has to be made right then.
Mm-hmm. For women as well looking to conceive, like what would you say are more holistic approaches that they can sort of adopt to take better care of their bodies before pregnancy? Because there's that leading up part as well before getting pregnant. So what would you sort of suggest, being that you've gone through a lot of different things yourself?
Yeah. Even if you're a year, 2 years from thinking about having kids, get off birth control. Like if you've been on it for
Hmm.
whatever 10 plus years, like get off birth control. Um, Birth control has been shown to completely deplete your body of nutrients that your body needs to have a healthy pregnancy. Um, so I know it's hard, especially if you're sexually active and you haven't had to learn to monitor your cycle, but get off birth control, learn to monitor your cycle, and really refill your body with a lot of these new nutrients that your body is
Hmm.
depleted from. The next, get on prenatal vitamins. Even if you don't want to get pregnant in the next 2 years, get on prenatal vitamins. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to get you pregnant. Um, it's just going to optimize your health for pregnancy when you are ready. The third thing is 100% work with a nutritionist. Like if you just don't
Hmm.
know really, like, you're like, I just eat food and then I whatever, like talk to a nutritionist.
Yeah.
Even if like weight's not a problem, it's really going to help you just optimize your health for your baby and your pregnancy. Um, I think a lot of this also includes the spouse or partner too. Like make sure your spouse is eating, make sure your spouse is on multivitamins, make sure they're not spending a whole bunch of time in the sauna and other things that can really hurt their anatomy there.
Right.
Um,
What
and
about
I
physical
think
exercise?
physical exercise, I think that this is a hard one because I think that everybody is different, like we were saying.
Hmm.
And I was doing CrossFit when I first started to get pregnant, and it was tanking my periods. Like I could not get pregnant and be a CrossFitter. Some people can, and that's great, and I love
Yeah.
that for them. But for me, I was a walker. Like if my exercise had to be walking, but like some people need more of that high exercise. So I think that's really where tracking your cycle comes into play is, get off the birth control, start tracking your cycle so you can see like where is my cycle the healthiest it is. Is it when I'm
Right.
walking? Is it when I'm doing high interval training? Is it when I'm not doing any exercise at all?
Right. I had sort of a similar experience to yourself in terms of cycles. Like I was also on birth control, same issues, like lots of different things when I was young, was that I have PCOS. So I had like acne and things like that. And the period thing was also like, oh, just go on it. And I think as young women, we go to the doctors, it is quite common for them to be like, well, what birth control are you taking and what do you want? And it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be on something. And I remember when I came off mine, and mine was more for symptomatics and things like that, because I had acne and I wanted to more regulate, I guess, my period too. Um, but same issue. 2 years I came off of it, there was no period like in sight. And it took me, I think, an additional couple of years just to get my body right again. And thank goodness I wasn't sort of already trying. But I could imagine, like what you were explaining, is that all of a sudden what happens if these women are in their 30s or late 30s maybe, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to come off birth control and like right away we're going to like get married, have kids, all that. and then all of a sudden you come off, there's no periods or lack of, maybe it's intermittent, and all of a sudden you're now facing a couple years battle trying to figure out like where your body is at, just to trying to get it back to sort of that nourishment again. So I love the advice that you give sort of on, you know, like being more natural, I guess, about it if you are planning on having children, just because it does really affect like your normal hormones. It does deplete a lot of different nutrients. And there are other birth control methods that you can use that are available. It's just, I think the education is missing. And that's
Mhm.
sort of what you explained in the beginning, is that tying that all back in together is basically that you really need to educate yourself about what you're taking, because it may be just helping you with symptoms that you're experiencing now. But as soon as you come off it, it basically brings forward anything that maybe you had already been experiencing, and it basically was masking the problem. So this is why a lot of women, like you said, come off birth control, different things, and go, well, how come like I'm having all these issues? It's because the birth control was masking really what was going on. And I think definitely giving your body sort of that chance to sort of reboot. What would be sort of the last piece of advice that you would advise to maybe any woman that was looking to get pregnant and really help their body sort of, um, you know, take care of them as well? Because the other one I think we didn't really touch on too much was the self care.
Yeah. Um, I mean, self-care is huge. I think especially in this society, we have gotten really big into um overdoing it. Like we're
Hmm.
overstressed, we're overstimulated. Like take time to rest, take time to deep breathe and meditate or whatever it is that like really
Yeah.
fills your soul. Because you can't pour from an empty cup. So self-care is huge. I fully am in support of that. As Remind me the first question.
Just in terms of like the self care, I think for ladies going into sort of conceiving for themselves, like, what are we doing? Are we nourishing our bodies? Are we taking more time to relax? Like, what are we sort of doing to help us with self care?
Yeah, I think self-care is huge, and I think, like, if you really are trying to get pregnant and you're just kind of at a loss or you're thinking about starting to get pregnant, a lot of doctors will tell you, wait a full year of trying to get pregnant, and if you're
Mm,
still having concerns, come talk to me then. And my biggest advice is do not wait that first year because then you're frustrated. You've had a year of complications, you've had a year of pain and suffering, and
hmm.
you're out a year that you could have been healing your body. And
Right.
so I'm a big like advocate for yourself, like to your providers, to your friends, whatever it may be. Um, get labs drawn. Like you shouldn't have to wait a year to get
Yeah.
pregnant to see where your thyroid hormones are. Like you should
Right.
be able to go to the doctor and be like, I'm concerned. I don't feel right. Let's check labs. And they should be like, great, let's do it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that there's, I think because we are we are nurses, and I think we have more of that advocacy for ourselves because we have a lot more knowledge based on kind of the
Right.
physiology and things like that. And that's sort of where I go with clients as well, is that have we had any thyroid looked at? Are you anemic? Like what have you had sort of previous experience? And like you mentioned with like eating disorders, things like that. And as soon as I kind of hear those signals, I'm like, go to your doctor, tell them this, like we need to get these like results, because otherwise, like you said, you're like a sitting duck and you're waiting for that year, and you could have had that all done
Right.
leading up to it. And it could just be something minor that we could maybe just start to work on and fix. So I love all the advice and everything that you've given the ladies here today, and sort of your own sharing your own story as well. So thank you so much for coming onto the show. Where can our listeners find you?
Yeah. So I have a website, faithandfertility.com, and then I'm on Instagram, Faith and Fertility. And then I also have a private Facebook group. If you truly are interested, you can ask to join that. It's also Faith and Fertility, and it's a Facebook group where you can ask questions about, hey, I'm learning to track my cycle. What does this look like? It kind of gives you free help without having to use me, but I can only help so much just for legal reasons on
Mhm.
there. And then we also just pray for each other on there. So, like, hey, I'm having a really hard time. Like, my cycles have just been so irregular and I don't understand why. And I would really just love prayer about some peace. And so we'll pray for you, things like that. So it's a really supportive community on there.
I love that. That's such a nice touch as well because it gives sort of that feeling of, it's not just about like the physical aspect, spiritual too. So I love that. So we'll have all the notes for the listeners here in the show notes. Stay tuned for our next episode and don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a show. In good health, everybody.